A turkey gave its life so that we could
Right.
feed.
Right.
Technically, that's a sacrifice, but that's a sacrifice to us.
Yeah. Yep.
Like made, well, it's made by us. I'm not sure if the turkey had a choice in it.
That's true.
Not really.
Probably not.
I mean,
don't
we
know if
raised
that would be
it.
their choice.
Or for it to.
So-
Turkeys don't make good choices.
No, they
Yeah.
don't, they don't. They stand there and watch the rain and they drown.
I heard that is like a well. They are dumb enough that when something is scary, they end up like following each other, and sometimes they get into like running around in circles. Whereas
My
they
dog
just
does the same thing.
have an instinct of following the other one, and the other one just falls leading.
Okay. Well, chapter 3 is the Queen. Grace for us includes hope for others. Now, that's an interesting concept. So, what did you think about this chapter? What did you think about it? Or actually, let's do the readings first. Someone want to read Isaiah 55, 1 through 9? There's a Bible here, there's a Bible there, there's a Bible there. And there's a Bible there. So, somebody,
What is it?
you want to grab Colossians? It's not those clips. I didn't change them. Someone can pull up Colossians 1 in the meantime. So it's Isaiah 55, verses 1 through 9.
Oh, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. And you who have no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why do you spend money for what is not bread, and your wages for what does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourself in abundance. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen that you may live, and I will make an everlasting covenant with you. According to the faithful mercies shown to David, behold, I have made him a witness to the peoples, a leader and commander for the peoples. Behold, you will call a nation you do not know, and a nation which knows you not will run to you. Because of the Lord your God, even the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. And let him return to the Lord, and he will have compassion on him and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts.
What's the second one?
Colossians 1, 15 through 20. So what do we think about that reading? There's songs. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's the
Beautiful.
first thing that comes to my mind
Colossians 1.
is the song.
The what?
Yeah.
Yeah, Seek ye the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should sing
Well,
that in
and-
our
Yeah.
other church's choir.
Yep.
Let all who thirst,
Seek ye the
let us
Lord
come
while he may be
to the water.
Yep. I got a different version, of course, because you know. Seek the Lord where he may be found. Come to him. Okay. Anyway,
Yes.
so what does that say to you? What does that say to you?
For me, it kind of connects to that whole idea that, well, God gives us love regardless, and based off of how human society works, we don't entirely understand that because we tend to think of stuff like love, sadly, as transactional. So it's pretty foreign and alien for that. But it's great, isn't it, that we are loved and forgiven no matter how many times we have made mistakes or just for being different. Just loved regardless.
He welcomes everyone.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is how the latter verses say, "My thoughts aren't your thoughts, my ways aren't your ways, but come anyway."
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know, like it's okay. it's okay. I mean, we can agree to disagree, kind of, sort of.
Yeah,
And that's an interesting
Yeah.
concept that God would, be that
Yeah.
forward thinking.
Well, the last
Imagine that.
Imagine that. Yeah.
I'll be glad to talk it over with you, more if you don't,
Yeah.
if you agree with me,
Yeah. We could talk about it.
we can talk about it, yeah.
Sure.
Oh, the last part is but what I see it is heaven is above the earth. My thoughts are above yours, and my word is above yours.
Yeah.
My mind is above yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like adding a bit of superiority.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which makes sense if God encompasses
Sure.
just
Sure.
all of creation. That
Yeah.
means that.
But from a human perspective, if it were you and I talking, and I were to say to you, well, Duncan, I want you to come and seek me out, but I'm nothing like you. I don't think like you. I ain't like you. I'm way above you. But come and find me anyway. I don't think you'd show up. Just saying, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting that God should say all these wonderful things and then say, even though,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Dennis Bucks has this concept of the church should be a bird feeder.
Should we what?
A bird feeder.
Bird
right?
feeder.
We put out bird seed,
Yeah,
and we don't know what birds are going to show up.
yeah,
Right?
you're right.
They choose whether they show up,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's what that verse is.
That's an interesting analogy, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that's the blessing box, right?
Yeah,
We got squirrels sometimes at our blessing box.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. There was one where were we the other day? Oh, in the parking garage at Henry Ford downtown. There was a squirrel found something in the garbage can and was sitting up on top of the garbage can having himself a little snack. And I was like, what are you doing here? And he kind of looked at me like, don't bother me, I'm eating.
It's
kinda
my
funny.
house.
I mean, it's got to do what it's got to do.
That's
to
right.
survive. I
That's
mean,
right,
It
yeah.
doesn't have agriculture like we do.
Right.
Although I guess you could say that burying acorns and forgetting where they are is something like agriculture.
Yeah, in his own way, in a squirrely way.
Yeah.
The squirrels are so plentiful, my gosh, you
I know.
gotta dodge them to get down the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other comments on this scripture passage? No. Are you going to read Colossians
Yeah.
first, Kelly? Okay. Colossians 1:15 through 20.
The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross.
So I looked that one up in the Cotton Patch Gospel.
Okay.
So this is what it says. So it starts at 13. He doesn't do the verses in the middle. But it was the Father who sprang us from the jailhouse of darkness and turned us loose in the new world of his beloved Son, through whom we got our pardon, the forgiveness of our crimes. He's a perfect photo of the unseen God and has got it over everything that ever was made, because he's the reason everything was put together, whether it's in heaven or on earth, whether seen or unseen, whether sitting on thrones or governors' chairs, on judges' benches, or in sheriff's offices. Through him and for him, the whole business has been put together. He's the starting point of everything, and he's got it all in the palm of his hand. 2, he is the boss of the body, his church. He is the source, the originator of the resurrection. The result is that he's tops any way you look at it. In him, God put all his eggs in one basket and showed through him that he was friendly toward everybody. Indeed, by the bloodshed at his lynching, he brought about peace with all, both on the earth and in heaven.
What version is that?
It's
Cool.
Cotton Patch Gospel. Clarence Jordan. 19.
Ultra modern language, but still
But
quite
Georgia,
powerful.
right? Everything gets translated to Georgia. So,
Yeah. Still quite
Oh, I remember
powerful.
You told me that. Yeah.
yeah.
It's kind of like the message, when you read the message.
It always bothers me if I'm reading something in a modern translation And I'll say, well, that's the way I learned it, you know,
Right.
you feel more comfortable in the way that
Right.
you learned it.
Of course.
Yeah, that is true.
Clarence Jordan is, he started Koinonia Farm in Georgia, which is where Habitat for Humanity came out. And so, he's got a lot of influence on people like Carter
Mm.
and a
Yeah.
lot of the social ministry that comes out of Georgia, so. Kinda cool. He wrote versions of all the, he didn't write Mark, he didn't do a paraphrase of Mark, but everything else. His Luke, Christmas story is really funny. 'Cause,
I bet.
yeah,
Yeah.
'cause they go to Jacksonville, they don't go to Egypt, they go to Jacksonville.
Huh. So, what do we think about this? Either translation. What is your take on that?
Just he's all encompassing. He's like,
Yeah.
The supremacy.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting how it starts, right? That Jesus is the unseen God, is of the unseen God, right? That we don't see God, but yet we don't see Jesus. People
Yeah.
have seen Jesus, so
Yeah.
you know it makes a big difference. Okay.
It's the firstborn of all creation.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's interesting, you know, it's not
That is
Adam.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, at firstborn. That kind of suggests.
Is there gonna be another one?
Yeah, well, it kind of suggests that, I mean, in order to be born, you have to be conceived, grown, given life. Born, I think, is
We merely adopted the darkness he was born in. Just
Yeah.
like
born of what, you know?
chaos.
I mean, we don't know. I mean, we don't know where God originated. We don't know where Jesus or the Spirit originated. I mean, we know Jesus as a human,
Right,
100% human and divine, but
but we always think that God always was, period, you know.
Yeah.
yeah, because it's,
You know, if he always was, and Jesus always was, so
But
his Spirit
Yeah.
always was.
firstborn has more of a connotation of, that's where everything's gonna go, right? You have backup children. The only one that really matters is the firstborn. That's who inherits your stuff,
Well,
right?
yeah.
And so,
Backup children.
yeah,
you know, like
No,
you're number
they-
4.
Hey, crap! I'm a backup child.
No.
I'm like the backup child.
but I mean, people in this age are gonna have
Yeah,
secondary children.
Right, yeah.
Cause they don't know which one's gonna survive.
That's
Right.
right,
Yeah.
They don't know
Yep.
who's gonna be the inheritor of the stuff. Everybody else gets nothing.
If they have stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you better be nice to me if I'm the first
That's
one.
right. Well,
But in this case, you know, Jesus is the inheritor of all creation.
Yeah, right, he's not talking,
Hmm.
yeah.
yeah.
Where does it
Okay, that
leave
makes
me?
sense.
Also, going back,
It leaves me nothing, right? You're right.
I guess going back with the invisible thing, I don't remember if like this version said something like being invisible but also visible, as in like when we think of God, like sometimes we tend to think of like a specific thing of what God might be, which I guess also goes on with the like seeing the force of God in our own lives. We tend to look for something much more extravagant than just the feeling of hope, the feeling of love. So seeing God as a present thing, you don't have to look too hard because it's all around you. It's
I
all
like
around
that.
you.
I like that
The first
idea,
thing of
Duncan.
Creation,
Yeah.
everything else was formed within that thing.
Yep.
Then that means we are within that thing. So it just really is interesting just thinking about like this beyondness, this how far from a comparable God is to us, though even despite that, we're still welcome. Even despite how complicated it is and how beyond it is, we are still welcome in its house. We are still welcome under its guidance.
Yeah.
Despite being not at all alike.
Hmm.
Despite by us not understanding it, not understanding why we are given such grace, such love, even if we feel we don't deserve it, especially when we feel we don't deserve
Yeah,
it.
right.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
is the
that's a
human
good
condition,
point.
right? That we don't feel we deserve it.
Yeah, because we see things as transactional.
Mhm.
Do you think we would feel more deserving if we could see God, or less deserving if we could see God?
Going back to last week, you know, the people who thought they would see God thought they would die from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think that
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I
gives you
think
the,
Yeah.
I think you can. For me, like I can see God in like a newborn baby. I can see God in like the flowers of spring, or the first snow, or how things just happen to line up. Like in my life, when things get really tough and money's really short, a check shows up in the mail. You know,
Yep.
just like the universe is taking care of, just is there to support me. But then when I stop and I think, how is God, where is God for me? Or people talk about like their personal relationship with Jesus. I'm like, what the freak is that? Like, you know, like for me, that is totally lost on me. I don't get it. I don't understand how to approach it. I don't, there's a big blank stare. But to know God exists and to see God in other things and other people, I'm there.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That makes sense.
Well, if you remember last week, right? One of the conclusions that we came to was that we don't have to go find God. God finds us.
True.
So we don't even have to go look. He's always there, and he comes to us.
True.
But it's so nice that we can see it and things
Yeah.
like that.
So you think if you could see God, that you'd be less likely to feel worthy?
I think so. It depends on what God looks like.
2 eyes, 2 ears, a mouth, a nose, you know.
Well,
big flames.
This big black
I know,
woman,
you're like,
this
"Ooh."
big black woman, this
again,
big
it was
afro,
the idea
and
of God being
big skirt.
because that's essentially what I always, what I thought with that whole thing. It was like creating things within itself,
Right.
being the universe itself. Because
Right.
like it's one thing to be the God of the universe, but it's also like being the God of the universe, but also being the universe.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm of the universe,
Yeah,
but I am
so-
the universe.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
seeing God you see God every day.
Yeah.
If that were the case.
Yeah.
And it's also if God's always with you, does God really need to take time to find you?
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that you're trying to
That's
move
good.
towards, or God's trying to move towards you. God's always with you.
True. That's true. Hmm.
Duncan, you got a lot of like mic drops tonight.
Yeah, I'm just-
You're
I-
doing-
Yeah,
you're
really,
on
he's-
fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
You're in the
I
zone.
think.
Yeah. Incredible.
So,
This might
okay.
be-
Any other comments on this?
Great.
Yeah, I think the key verse is verse 20. Through him, God was pleased to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, by making peace through the blood of his cross. In other words, to paraphrase that, things were made right with God through the death of Jesus on the cross. So that doesn't imply any actions on our part.
Right,
or
It's
anything
not
like
effective.
that.
right.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that verse really stands out to me as maybe almost the basis of Lutheran theology.
Yep. Yeah, theology of the cross, for sure.
Oh, okay, is that it?
Yep.
I see.
You might hear more about that this week.
Yes, you probably will, you probably will hear more about that on Sunday, I bet you.
Just maybe,
Yeah,
Oh,
unless
Yeah.
some major revisions happen, but
yeah,
it's unlikely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good. That's a good conversation. How about, so what stood out to you in this chapter?
I mean, really just the idea that because of the idea of heaven, people really think it's okay that people's lives get cut short. Like that,
Oh, the Aurora
not
thing.
only, yeah, that not only disgusts me, but that infuriates me. Because it's just unfair. Like, if you have such potential in, if there's such potential in a human life, like that a person, like a single person can do so much that, oh, it's okay that they're dead, they're going to another place now. All of that stuff they could have done, are you just gonna throw that out the window? Are you gonna just throw that opportunity out the window and say, oh, these other people whose lives still matter, they're going to hell, they're gonna suffer. Like, they have potential there too.
If it gives us an excuse to not pass gun laws.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
just,
that's true.
it, it just makes me disgusted and angry.
Well, and that was the Lutheran response, right, to that statement made by Jerry
Yeah.
Newcomb.
Mhm.
If a Christian dies early, if a Christian dies young, it seems tragic, but really it's not tragic because they are going to a wonderful place. On the other hand, if a person doesn't know Christ, if they knowingly reject Jesus Christ, then basically they're going to a terrible place.
Don't you think sometimes though, I mean, we say that to people all the time. When somebody dies, we say, oh, they died too young, but they're in a better place now. We say that all the time as a way to justify
Yeah.
what God has done.
I think we know better now. I think there has been a lot more publicly said that's not helpful.
People say it.
Right, but it's,
people
you know,
say
it's-
it all the time.
They do say it all the time.
People say that all the time. Oh well, they're in a better
That's
place.
that's uncomfortable rhetoric. It's like you don't know what to say to someone who just
Right.
lost somebody, so you come up with this stuff. Like you always say, "I'm so sorry for your loss." Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
it's you know it's
like
it's
with Tammy,
rote.
she was in a lot of pain, and so for sure, you know, we can express that she is not in the pain that she was in,
Correct.
Yes.
Right. No longer in pain. No longer suffering.
Mhm.
and she
And that would be
certainly-
followed by, and now she's in a better place. People will say that.
People will say that. I wouldn't say that.
But people will say that.
Right. Right.
It makes me think of that. There's like a Christian song. Sometimes I put on the Christian channel. I'm trying to get more into the Christian music, but it's hard for me. But that
Smile with that.
this, yeah, like this is, how's it go? Like, this is not where I belong.
Yep.
Like I'm like they're supposed to be in heaven, and that one always makes me wonder, and it makes me think about this. That's what I started to think about when I was reading this. Like, I don't really understand that.
There's a lot of dispensationalism. So where people think, so this is a vast contrast to the idea that Jesus died in exchange for our death, right?
Yeah.
So the idea that Jesus died and that's an exchange, as long as I say the right magic words and I profess my faith and I'm born again, then I've unlocked the key and now I'm sucked into the the bank vault on high.
Yeah.
Right? Like I've been
The heavenly
deposited into the
vacuum.
teller. Yeah, and that is very faulty.
Yeah.
It's not biblical. It's and that's where we get back to theology of the cross. That we see God's presence in our lives now. That vision is that God is in heaven and has no interaction on earth until you say the magic words and get sucked up into that.
Which is just a bunch of baloney.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of baloney.
I'm gonna go back to the deaf thing for a second. So, not everybody can or will live into their 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, some people have to die young. Some people will die in their middle-aged time. Some people will die all along the spectrum.
Yeah.
Some
As
people will
infants.
die as infants,
Mhm.
and some people will die in their 90s, in their hundreds. And I mean, that's the natural order of things. Like, it has to be. Does it have to be that there's gun violence and a schoolroom full of children get gunned down? No, that does not have to be. But like, my mom died at 41. Was that painful? Yes, it was horrible. But there has to be a spectrum of, I mean, the planet can't sustain everybody living past 100. You know, I mean,
Right.
it's not a possibility for that. So, I don't know. We say things to comfort each other and whatnot, but it's a reality of the world.
And people die for different reasons.
Sure.
I mean, people just don't die because, you know, their ticket got punched.
Yeah, like
And it's
they're
your
just
turn.
like, whoop.
Yeah.
It's not where I
turn.
belong.
I mean, we say that. I mean, we always say that, like, when your parking meter dings, your time's up. But I mean, people die for all kinds of reasons: car accidents and sickness and
Yeah.
And
all kinds
you know,
of things.
perfectly healthy people having heart attacks and strokes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Um,
Exactly.
And a lot of times it's not their fault at all. I mean,
Right,
it's an
absolutely.
accident or something
Right.
like
Right,
that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We had another tragic situation. Man that I work with, he belongs to the Detroit church. I think they're a non-denominational church. But anyway, so he showed me a picture of this child who was 9 years old, and he said, "We just heard that he couldn't breathe, and his foster parents took him to the hospital, and he died. And in the process of whatever they did at the hospital, they discovered bruises on his body.
Mm.
Oh.
Covered what?
Bruises on his body.
Oh.
So I don't know any more than that, but that they did take the foster parents in, and they did question them. But you know, I mean, and so this Dave was just beside himself. He said, "I love that child." He said, "Every time I saw him on Sunday, he'd come and wrap his arms around me, you know, and say, 'Hi, Dave, how you doing?' You know, this kind of stuff." And he said his foster father, he followed him around all the time. So he said, I can't, and they were good friends, husband and wife, they were good friends. I can't believe that they would have done anything to that child. But my only prayer in that whole situation is that my prayer is that I thank Jesus that he's got him in his arms, that this child he's not, whatever happened, he doesn't have to tolerate that any longer. It's over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I know, you know, it's a big loss to so many people.
Yeah.
But I have to believe that way, that he's getting the comfort and the love that he deserves.
Yeah.
You know. Life is tough.
It is hard.
I think of that does come to mind that I do. I personally think of it like two ways. I don't think somebody should, like another person should should basically make the choice for another person of how long they live. I don't think somebody should kill another person, get rid of any of that opportunity that
Right.
they had.
Yeah.
But I also think that it's better to live without pain. Like, I just think that is no way to live. Like,
Yeah.
It's not living if you are just suffering to just breathe,
Well,
suffering to just move.
And the people that, you know, that are put on life support and they say that there's nothing more we can do for them, you know, this sort of thing. And the family has to make that decision, what they're gonna do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very painful decision, but as far as the person, according to the doctors, that they will not live much longer. So I don't know, do you stop their life today or do you wait till next week and stop their life? You know?
Yeah.
I will say I had a hard time personally, as a nurse, when a patient was taken off a ventilator. We did what was called a terminal wean, and a terminal wean involves giving morphine intravenously through the vein
For pain,
for pain, but morphine also suppresses the breathing drive, so you're accelerating.
It's calming.
It's calming,
Yeah.
but you're accelerating death
Mhm.
because you're suppressing a person's
So you're suffocating them with drugs.
Yeah,
That's what it
basically.
comes down to.
kind of.
Because
Yeah.
you're taking the breath support away. and
You've already taken the breath support away because you've taken the ventilator out.
Mhm.
Now you're giving medicine that
Let's stop
suppresses
the
their drive, further suppresses their drive to breathe,
Mhm.
and pain control, which puts them, allows them to not to come awake.
Yeah.
If they're gonna come awake, they don't come awake as much. So it's hastening death.
Mhm.
And as a nurse,
tough.
it was tough. It was tough, and I had to really reconcile with myself. And I'm somebody like what you. I don't know if you were getting at like assisted suicide, if what you were saying, or
No,
that was that.
No, I am not talking about assisted
Okay.
suicide. That is just.
But for me, I was kind of in a spot where I was like, I believe a person has a right to end their life with dignity and comfort,
Mhm.
and a good death if possible. But for me, it was a little bit of a quandary. It really
Well,
was.
you know, Beverly Rose, who died, 2 years ago,
Mhm.
almost. I mean, she said, take this off. You know, I'm tired. I want to go. I'm tired.
Mhm.
I've fought enough, and you know, please let me go.
Well,
You know.
and in a hospital environment, that there's not a single person that makes that choice. You know, it's
No.
done with consultation and there
Oh,
are
right.
ethicists involved
Yeah.
and all that. So
But it's the nurse who does the work.
Right.
It's the nurse who's
yeah,
the one.
It's certainly not the ethicist that does it.
Right. It's the
Yeah,
nurse doing the
exactly. They just get
actual
the
work
paycheck.
of the medication
Right.
for the
Right.
patient.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's hard, really.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so, so the whole beginning of this whole thing that is about how we as Lutherans react to this general belief that, well, apparently it's a belief in hell. What do we believe? We know clearly that Luther might have had an issue with what we call, or what we recognize as purgatory, maybe, because the whole Reformation started with, paying for indulgences. And indulgences was the idea that you can buy
Somebody
time
Yeah.
off for good behavior.
You should buy your way out of hell.
Yeah, and so it's a belief that when you die, you don't go to heaven or hell directly. You go to this place. It's like a way station, right? Unless you're really, really bad, I guess then you make the
Don't
direct
have
trip.
your bus ticket, so you got your
Right.
GoFundMe out there.
It's like
Get you the list of the way to heaven.
it's like rehab. You
Your
go-
GoFundMe.
Just like the
Indulgences
Catholic Church,
go
but like, hey,
funding.
Christians, you sin. Now you can buy your way out of it.
Panhandle
Sure.
your way to heaven.
Yeah.
What about the man that died and went to hell and said, let me tell my brothers, tell my brothers, or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And that didn't happen. The brothers had to make up their own minds about Jesus.
Right.
So, you've got that too. So I don't know, where was he at that point? It made you,
Right.
I don't know, forget who it was, his name was, but anyway, it makes you believe that he was actually in hell,
Hmm.
you know, and he didn't want the people that were left to experience that, and that he thought, well, you know, that if they accept Christ, that would not happen to them.
Yeah.
So what is your belief? What is your stance on hell?
It's confusing.
It is.
It is, it is.
It is.
It
But
is.
but I mean, you know, if you put it in perspective of we believe and we see it everywhere that God is love. How then could a God that is love, who pursues humans to save them and prepares a place for them in heaven,
Except for those few,
except for those
for
few,
many.
or many,
Yes.
yeah, could possibly condemn a human to eternal damnation with this whole, you know, fiery furnace with with gnashing of teeth. How can you say those two things in the same sentence?
Yeah. So yesterday we went to Pittsburgh. We did a day trip with the kids. When had a distant cousin that passed away, so we went to a funeral, and we're driving, and there was a big billboard that had like a fiery image on the bottom, and people writhing about, and then it was and
It's
it
a haunted house.
no,
Oh.
I wish. It was like, accept Jesus because, essentially, accept Jesus or you're going to hell. Like,
Yeah.
and the kids,
Yeah.
we passed it multiple times because of where we were. And they're like, what is this? Like,
Yeah.
why would anybody put this there? And so I was really grateful because I personally, growing up Catholic, always was very afraid of hell. It was always something that was talked about a lot in church and in my home, and I never really bought it. I really had a hard time with it, and ultimately that's sort of what drove me away from going to church, because I couldn't make the leap, and so I always have had that sort of view that, but then how do you reconcile horrible things that people do? It's hard and
Horrible
confusing.
people.
But I was really grateful that you had posted, because Gwen and I are trying to explain, we're like, well, that's not really what we believe. We believe that Jesus and God are all loving, and, that's not really the way that Jesus, like, we were laughing. Jesus probably shaking his head at that person that made that billboard.
Like seriously,
you
weren't you paying
really
attention?
didn't listen,
Yeah.
And then but they just kept talking about it, and I pulled up your quote that you had put up on your Facebook, on the Unity Facebook page, about being overly, I might be a heretic for saying that
Yeah.
hell doesn't exist, but I'd rather be there
Rather be a
than
heretic,
believing
yeah.
in fire and brimstone.
Yeah.
So I was really grateful, and I'm like, gosh, this feels really good. Like, I feel like I'm in the right religion. I'm like, oh,
Aren't we wonderful?
I know it. Yeah, this is good.
Well,
At all
that
times.
quote actually came from a book. We went to a book signing last Friday
Yeah.
up in Perrysburg, and the author, Derek Ryan Kubelis, he's a pastor, a Methodist pastor. This is his second book.
But he's drifting Lutheran, apparently.
Well, he does have a little bit of
This is-
Lutheran.
that is
He was
a very
he was
Lutheran-
very
very-
grateful
very
to have a
Methodist.
Lutheran in the room.
Because
But anyway, he wrote this book called Holy Hell, and it's a case against eternal damnation. And he gave a really interesting talk about it, saying that there's been a misinterpretation of Scripture, that hell, the word hell, doesn't even exist. All right, and there's like other words like Gehenna and Hades, and even in Sunday's Gospel you'll hear the word hell, but it's a translation, right? So
Yeah.
we know as Bible literate. I'll call us Bible literate. At least Lutherans are Bible literate. That you know, translation can screw things up,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
One example we had real quickly was the whole thing with the beheading of John the Baptist.
Yeah.
That they referred to the person who danced as Herodias.
Mhm.
Herodias was the wife. The,
Mhm.
the daughter was Salome.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a misinterpretation.
Mhm.
You know, that kind of stuff. So if something that minor can happen, well, you know, obviously this can. He gave the argument for, he calls himself a purgatorial universalist. Meaning, yeah, I know, it's a mouthful. He does not accept hell as anything for the reason that I stated in my question. How can you, in the same sentence, say that a loving God who created you, who gave up his son so that you could be saved, would allow you to burn, even if it's not burning,
Mm-hmm.
And assign you
put
there.
you in yeah,
Yeah.
permanent, like forever
Mhm.
damnation.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. There's
Right.
no logic behind it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that's the kind of stuff that he talked about, and actually, I'm gonna recommend that we do this book
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would
after
love that.
after we're done with this one. It's a little bit more expensive, obviously, it's like $26, but it's a good
Yeah.
book. Or I can just, you
We
know,
should go steal them.
Print
We should find
stuff
out
out.
where his thing is and then just.
well, I have a
Because we
signed,
would go to
I have
hell
a
for
signed
taking
copy.
them.
Oh.
I say it really is an interesting conversation or debate because there are various arguments and they're interesting in their own ways of like making sense of it. Like one which I don't personally buy that I have heard is that this can work because hell is not God's creation, which that belittles God, but it doesn't make it any better. I personally believe that that it doesn't exist, but I do believe that it's a state of mind. Like it can be many different things. Like
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
if you're
Yeah, people
Like
say
heaven
I've been
and
to
hell
hell
on
this
earth.
week.
Yep.
you know?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
life has been like heaven, or just experiences have been heavenly. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, we use those descriptions pretty often, though the history of the term and such, the translation is part of it. There are many different faiths before Christianity have their own underworlds, and they aren't like full of suffering exactly. I mean, sure, they're like under the earth, and people would associate what's under the earth, especially now, with like hot music, or it's like molten core. But what makes those different than if there is a hell? What made people? It's not a matter of what made those different. It's what made hell depicted as. What makes this realm supposed to be a land where people are burning for eternity, where they have to walk on very hot sand, and if they lay down, they're burning for 100 years and can't move, that there are a bunch of winds blowing them around and around, like, and just everything feels fake. What made that the case when all the other underworlds of previous dead faiths, some not dead, what made hell different compared to afterlives where that wasn't the case? It's just this world but the next.
So the God that we attest to in our confession is not an easy sell, right? It's not easy to preach a sermon that says God loves you no matter what you do. God will continue to love you. There's nothing you can do to avoid that. So now, put money in the offering plate and help feed the poor and do all that. We go, well, if I don't, then what's going to happen? Well, nothing. God's still going to love you. And it's really hard to preach that.
Yeah.
It's really hard to think that you're actually helping people, and especially when you've got some sort of social movement you want to try to make happen. And so we see in the Great Awakenings, we get resurgences of these concepts of hell.
Yep.
They're really, you can, they make really interesting images, right? You see a billboard and you go, Dante's Inferno, right?
Oh, yeah.
Not biblical, and yet
Not right,
influences
exactly,
everything
yes.
else.
He talked
Yeah.
about that
And
too.
it's a crutch for the preacher. But it catches, right? And we're susceptible to this in America, partially because our American Christianity grows from people who didn't study the Bible. They read the Bible, but that's all they had. They didn't have tradition and scholarship beyond that, or translation. They didn't go back to original texts because they only knew their form of English.
Yeah.
And so that's what they've got.
But you come around to the idea that God did all these things for us, which included promising us eternal life, promising us life eternal with Him, okay, where He is. But He's everywhere.
Right.
So what does that mean exactly? Okay. And if we believe that when we die that our human body remains, well then damnation in a fiery pit would be a pretty horrible thing, except that you're not consumed. Right? I mean, if you're going to be in this place for eons, for eternity, what does that mean? If your body is not consumed, we have a common practice of cremation. Your body is consumed by flames. It doesn't take long. You're dust.
Yeah.
Poof, you're dust. So how can you go to a place, quote unquote,
Yeah.
and be in this eternal fire and not be consumed?
Yeah.
Is it like just to the edge? Like you
Yeah.
never know.
Like Sisyphus.
Is this today?
I mean,
Is
it
this
could
the
be
hour?
that where, like, yeah.
You know.
I mean, it also could be metaphorical. Like, it's not specifically burn. It's just like whatever is most painful.
Just put me in a pit with spiders. That's
Yeah.
very painful for me.
Or it's like that the bad place would just be the only torment there is
Chuck E. Cheese.
not like by design.
Yeah.
But unless you would say it's just like living in an extremely hostile environment. But it would be like it's only hell because there are no restrictions and the people around there are free to do whatever they want, including harm.
What do we do with Jesus's, like, when Jesus was preaching and saying, like, talking, and I know you have done sermons on the, like, separating the sheep and the goats, and, like, but he often says, like, separating and
The goats
gnashing
and
of
the sheep.
teeth,
Yeah,
and, like,
Yeah.
what do we do with that
Yeah.
as Lutherans?
and they talk about the judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah, the final judgment.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like you're, it's not we don't believe in purgatory, it's like a holding spot until everybody is in this holding spot, and now we're gonna have a judgment.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the case, right? If you believe what Revelation says, right? Christ comes again and there's judgment. But if you're already damned, you can't be judged. You've already been judged. So that takes away from the final judgment.
But
So-
couldn't you? But couldn't you? I mean, if you're in heaven, you've already been judged. Couldn't you be judged if you're in hell? Maybe you get rejudged. Maybe you were judged wrong.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know. The living and the dead. The living and the
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah,
It doesn't say about, well, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, because guess what? None of us in
We
this
don't
room,
know.
none of us in this room have died and gone anywhere, heaven, hell, or
Jesus-
purgatory.
And Jesus,
Not that we know
and
of
Jesus
it.
hasn't come back yet either.
And we ain't come back yet
And
either,
Jesus
right?
hasn't come back. So.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't died and our souls go to like just darkness and like there's nowhere to go, so except go
Yeah.
back to their bodies.
Yeah.
Like
Well, we had it in that text, right? That Jesus is of the unseen God. There are things that are beyond our understanding,
Well-
and it doesn't do us any good. It's
No.
not like you're gonna go
You
to
could
heaven.
debate it forever.
You're not gonna go to heaven if you're right, you're not gonna go to hell if you're wrong, right? It's we are people.
Mystery of our faith.
Mhm.
At least we have a more acceptable and more understandable, at least a more humane understanding of afterlife as Lutherans, as opposed
Yeah.
to the Catholics who want to send unborn or who want to send infants that die without being baptized to limbo.
Yeah.
What is that? I know it's a dance, but that's all it is to me.
the description.
What
Yeah.
bad thing that poor
Yeah.
baby do
I had such a hard time with it.
that they don't go to heaven? Come on, give me a break.
What is it? What is it we say? The God who surpasses all understanding.
Mhm.
Yes.
I think that's kind of where we're at. It's like
Yep.
Mhm.
the mystery of our faith, the God who surpasses all of our all our understanding. There's just things we don't know and we
What-
won't know.
what-
I think that's why we have the Bible, so that people can sit around and discuss all this stuff, because
Right.
nobody knows.
But the
what
Bible-
God-
but the
what God
Bible-
intended
Yeah,
has
you
come
can
out.
theorize
But the Bible
all day long.
contradicts itself.
So what
Yes,
Luther,
but
what Luther
that's not,
introduces,
so it gives us something to talk about.
what Luther introduces to Christianity is the ability to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And ask questions too.
Yeah.
Because in the Catholic Church, you ask a question, they say, "Don't talk about that. It's a mystery of the church."
And if you keep asking,
You just
we're gonna
accept that.
excommunicate you.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah, that
A
was
lot
the
of
answer you got.
churches are like, a lot of faiths are like that.
Yeah.
Don't
Don't
ask.
ask.
Yeah,
Because
just you
questions are
blindly
defined.
accept what they say. Boom. You don't question it.
Or like the big box churches that we've been to, they preach, they say one little tiny excerpt of scripture. They might say like Jesus loves you. That's it. That's all the scripture for the day. And they do a whole sermon on that.
Yep.
Nothing, there's no Bible
Right.
reading, there's no 2 readings, 3 readings, there's
None of that,
nothing.
no.
It's just,
No.
there's
It's
just,
what makes you feel good,
one little,
what makes you put something in the offering.
yeah, that's all there is. There's no,
And by the
Well,
No.
you're putting it in for the band because the
There's
music's
no
always
meat.
great.
and by the teacher.
there's
Yeah.
no meat.
Because we've gone to church with her brother and sister-in-law. They go to a big
Milk,
Baptist
no
church.
meat.
No?
Milk, no meat.
Milk, no meat. Yeah.
When
But-
Bill and I were both members of the Gideons,
Yeah.
and when and there's a question, you have to fill out an application and you have to answer these questions. And one of the questions is, do you believe in the lake of fire as quoted in Revelation, whatever it is? And you're signing your application, you're saying yes.
Wow.
And there are not many Lutherans in the Gideons.
No.
I don't
didn't-
imagine.
In fact,
What's
it's
the
very
Gideons?
unusual.
What's the Gideons? I don't
They're
know.
the people that put the Bibles in the hotel
In
rooms.
Oh,
hotels and
okay.
motels,
Okay.
but I was also a member of the auxiliary, and we went to nursing homes, we went
Okay.
to doctors and dentist offices.
Okay.
Prisons probably too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
You never heard of the Gideon Bible?
Yeah, sure.
We used to have a Gideon speaker. In fact, I put our name in several times. That was when Pastor Jack was here, and I said, I'm sure that Pastor Jack would welcome a Gideon speaker to come. I mean, they tell you what they're doing, what the work that they're doing, and then they take an offering. The offering is to buy Bibles. The Gideons are all volunteers, and wherever they travel or conventions or whatever, I mean, we had to pay for all of our own way and everything, you know. We give they probably have, I don't know what the percentage is, but better acceptance overseas than they do in the United States, just because of how we have, drifted, whatever.
So it's not a religious denomination,
No,
it's
no,
a
it's
Christian.
activation,
It's Christian,
an activist
business,
group.
and
Yeah.
professional men.
Okay.
Yeah, and they just, I don't know, that's how it started. And they used to be able to give testaments to, in fact, Bill was involved in it very deeply, to every service, every person going into the armed services.
Oh.
And he used to go every Saturday down to the induction center, and the men were required to take a testament. I mean, the commanding officer would say, this man's going to talk to you about, and they couldn't preach, they could do nothing but just say, we're from the Gideons and we have a gift for you. But what happened was, this has been years, maybe 15 years ago, there were some Gideons that would go, that would be their job, they would go, but they would wanna preach. And it got to the whatever, and they said, that's it, you're done.
Yep.
And so they're not allowed to
Breaking
do
the
that anymore.
rules.
They used to give out thousands and thousands and thousands, because everybody, it was required that they take a testament.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of testimonials that the soldier's carrying a testament in his pocket, and that's where the bullet goes. It doesn't kill him, that's where it
Yeah.
goes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, we've heard a lot of things like that, but anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're still very active.
Yeah.
The group that we were with, we had a Missouri Synod Lutheran, and two Missouri Synod Lutherans that were in our group. It was very unusual, very unusual. And Bill used to speak in other churches. If we'd go to convention, they would assign 15 or 20 churches that Gideons, if they wanted to go and speak, could. And we went to many, many places.
I think that's just fascinating and wonderful to have like
Yeah.
an organization like that and have people of different faiths and denominations of Christianity come together,
Yeah, they're
work
all
together for
Protestant,
something.
all Protestant
Yeah.
religions. Yeah.
We had
That's
a
amazing.
little tiny Bible, a little white tiny Bible that we would hand
Yep,
out in
that's
the
what nurses,
NICU.
given to the nurses, they're white.
In the NICU when a baby died.
Wow.
They had red ones for, they give Bibles to 5th graders and up, because they figure 5th graders can read.
Mm-hmm.
They don't give many lower. But they have all colors, they, whatever they have. Men are brown and women are blue and nurses are white and, but as an example, I'm tooting my horn, but I was able to give a testament to a granddaughter who was graduating from nursing school, and we were there, and so they let me do that, so that was kind of neat. So, anyway. I'm not active anymore since Bill died. It's no fun. It's no fun.
Yeah.
Well, to wrap this up, I'll say this.
Yeah, please set us straight. Give us.
I'm not setting you straight, no. I'll just say this.
Yeah.
I personally believe that if we disavow the idea of hell, or disavow the idea of eternal damnation, that we can live a happier, fuller, more committed Christian life, because we're not worried about all that crap that eternal damnation represents. Right? So we don't have to like second guess stuff, or I think we just be more genuine.
Yeah.
More genuine.
Well,
Well, as
they
Luther
say
would
that no sins. No, there's not a greater sin. There's everybody sins and they're all the same.
Yeah.
Just,
It's something we
Luther
do.
says specifically, sin boldly.
yeah,
You're gonna sin, so sin boldly.
Yeah,
yeah.
you're human.
You're gonna make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. And
So
what you
do
do
we-
is no better than what I do.
Right.
No.
Yep. So,
Now, the human law will say differently.
Who will?
The
The
human
human law.
law, you're not exempt.
Oh.
You're not exempt from criminal prosecution.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
And
true.
also
Well,
privacy
yeah,
against
but the
humanity.
law,
Unless you're elected president.
the law and the gospel.
yeah,
Separate.
total immunity.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things they leave out, right? Is that when the church and the government are together, then God's condemnation is the people's condemnation, and the people's condemnation is God's condemnation. So, but we don't do that. So we have a system of laws for people, and then God has the rest.
Yep.
It's best not to wield both swords.
That's right, because they're heavy.
With that,